for those that can't join for the whole 45 minutes or so, or others that may be interested in. We'll have these on our website, and you can play this back at your convenience. So we're going to get going. I apologize for the late start. I had to restart my system, but now we're good to go. So before I begin, TriStar has some time-limited offers that do expire at the end of this month. So another 8 days or so if you want to take advantage of them. I just wanted to mention this. A lot of these will run out at the end of June. So let's get into our presentation. So today what I want to go through is kind of beyond the basics. So we took a look at last time in our previous webinar on how can we manage our BOMs inside Windchill? How does that look like? How can we create these BOMs? Today we're going to take a look at some additional functionality. Once you're managing this Windchill part BOM in Windchill. So we're going to take a look at something called Options and Variants. We're going to take a look at how we can manage color and variability on parts. Also, how we can put in some supplier part information, as well as any replacement parts that I need to communicate in my BOM if some parts are not available. We're also going to take a look at, once we have a part created in Windchill, how can we minimize the proliferation of part numbers by classifying them and giving the end user an easy-to-use search to look for the parts that the designer may need. That also includes supplier parts. So if you have designated parts with their own numbers that are coming in from vendors or manufacturers, then I can also classify it that way. We're also going to take a look at, once we have a BOM in Windchill with all this nice rich information, how can we then communicate that to downstream systems like ERP systems or manufacturing scheduling systems? So we're going to take a look at how Windchill can be used to transform a BOM from a design state to maybe a manufacturing state, which in some cases for some of our customers is maybe 80% similar, but that other 20% or more is not what ends up in the ERP system or in manufacturing. So how can we, in the planning phase, how can we keep the two synchronized without doing a lot of rework over and over again if there's changes? And then we're going to end off the presentation with how can we then push these BOMs into ERP, and then also, because we're creating these different type of BOMs with a lot of data attached to them, how can we compare them if things change? So if there's new revs of parts used in the BOM, or if there's new new BOMs created off of a single design or a previous design. So I'm going to try to get through this. It's not going to go into depth on any of these topics. We may have some of these in future webinars, and of course if you're interested in any of these topics, feel free to contact us, and we'll be happy to kind of do a deep dive into any of these sections. First, what I'll do is I'll start off with options and variants. And before I begin, I forgot to mention, towards the end of the webinar, you'll have an option to put in your questions, and I'll try to answer as many as I can in the time we have. And if not, as always, contact your TriStar sales representative, and they'll be happy to assist you with any questions you may have had. Okay, so let's get into the first topic, which is the options and variants functionality. So Windchill, once I create a BOM, and this is a part BOM, which could be driven by CAD or it could be a top-down BOM that I'm creating, allows me to configure those for things like assemble to order or configure to order workflows. So in Windchill, I can essentially create an overloaded BOM, which means I can put in a generic BOM with options that a user can configure. And depending on the type of configuration that you're doing, Windchill, through its options and variants functionality, or modularity, we'll be able to, kind of give the user the ability to assemble a new variant of that BOM. You'll be able to configure with rules and options and choices. So I can put in, for example, some of the options with some rules that may not be available for other options if a different rule is in play. So I'll go through an example of this. But at the end of the day, if you have a product that you can, kind of start off with various options and then configure it to a downstream standalone part number, which includes some of those options that were selected. And then those are then, on that purchase order or on that customer order that are then sold to customers, can be tracked in Windchill coming off from that source. There's other configuration options like a custom engineered or more engineered to order. This Windchill variant options and variants doesn't support that today, although we do have support for that in other modules in CAD and Windchill that we can do those type of approaches. But today I'll just kind of focus on just the options and variants functionality. So there's a lot of wizards that allow you to create this BOM as well as for the end user to configure it. It's not a sales configurator, so we don't expect salespeople to go in here and start configuring their own BOMs for their customers. If that's the case, we have other software that does this. This is more for an engineering configurator. But the goal here is to create a structure, give it several modules or options for each of the systems or subsystems, and then define choices for the user to select to kind of take that overbuilt BOM and narrow it down to a BOM that the user needs with all those options. The BOM itself can be created just as a list of parts, or it could be linked to CAD models. So if I have a CAD assembly that I also need, and I need to generate drawings for that specific BOM variant, then if I create that BOM in the CAD world, my appropriate CAD model will be taken to that new BOM. So to set this up with CAD, obviously we need common references. We could be doing this with the options modeler in Creo. We could be doing this with other CAD, which then the CAD designer will go in and verify in the CAD software that, yes, that's the geometry I'm looking for. Everything's connected properly. So at the end of the day, I can get a 3D CAD model that the user can look at. And also for the quoting phase, if engineering kind of configures a BOM, I can then send that rough configuration for quoting purposes. So if a customer is looking for a quote, the salesperson needs to provide that. You can just configure that BOM really quickly, and then if that becomes an order, you can then start working off of that design without going back and reconfiguring it again. Because traditionally, most of the configurations take place in the Excel or ERP systems, and then that gets handed back to engineering, and engineering then has to has to start work on that. Well, the work is almost done. You just have to then complete the work if that is done in Windchill. So we're going to take a look at an example of this inside Windchill. One of the options or one of the rule sets that I can define is things like include and exclude rules. So if I put in different options, for example, for colors, different part numbers are going to be selected for that specific variant when I select that type of color. And if that color is not going together with another style of a part or another component, then there are rules that I can define in Windchill that will prevent those other choices to be selected if I select another previous choice. And when you look at the BOM itself, you'll be able to see what were those choices selected. So if I'm looking at a configured BOM, a variant of the main structure, I can actually see what those choices are. You can always go back and change those choices in Windchill, so you can keep reconfiguring that BOM, until you're happy with it. So once that BOM is configured, I can then save that BOM as a variant. So this will have its own part number and its own configuration. Windchill also allows me to save the variant specification. So all the choices that I selected, Windchill allows me to save this and have it traced back to the source overloaded BOM as well as the module variant that I created. So I can always go back in time and see, well, what were those choices that were selected for that variant, and if maybe I revise that variant, I can select other choices if the customer comes back and wants other options. So before we get into the next section, I want to get into my system and just go into Windchill and see some examples of this variant functionality. So I'm going to log into my Windchill system. And I just restarted my system, so this is loading the caches for the first time. So if it seems a bit sluggish, this is usually not normal. So let me go back and select the top overloaded structure. So this in Windchill will give me a different icon. So if I'm looking at these different parts that I have created, this is an end item overloaded structure part. If I go into the structure itself, I'll see the bill of material for that specific BOM. And this is a computer workstation. That's one example that I'm using. So this computer's workstation is going to have different sizes of hard drive, different sizes of memory modules, different video cards and processors and so on. So, and it's also going to be shipped to different geographies. So, if I'm shipping this to Asia, I might have to include software or user manuals in that language, whatever that country is, versus North America or Europe. Right? So those could be my options. So here, if I take a look at my structure, and I'll just expand out some of these. Here I have essentially 4 submodules in this structure. If I expand out each submodule, there are various options for each module. So here I can see that there's various options for processors, various options for memory, and so on. So each of these are module variants. And if I take a look at what are the choices that this processor can have, is, for example, if it's a tower, I'm going to have these 3 options or these 4 options available. If it's a mini tower, I might have only this option available, and so on. So these are my expressions that I've assigned that I can see inside of this BOM here. And this here itself is a module. So if I take a look at what's connected to this part, there could be CAD models connected to any of these documents and so on. So if I, for example, look at the associate objects, there are some documents connected to this one. If I look at maybe some of these other ones, I can show what is linked to all of these, and those themselves could have their own options that come in with these modules. Okay, so how do I define these options? So if I if I select an object here, which is some kind of processor, if I right-click on that object, there's an option to assign different expressions or these rules that I selected or created rather for this choice of processor. So here, if I look at some of the choices, I might say, well, what is the the operating system option? So far I just chose the chassis option, but if I do, let's say maybe for marking purposes, this might go into a different language, or let's say I'll just choose an operating system here. So let's say this one only comes with maybe this is quite old, so let's say maybe Windows Vista Business. That'll be another choice that I can select. And when I select that choice, that processor will only be selected for that choice. So I'll refresh this and refresh here in the browser. That choice will come up. So there's a series of rules that I created and all these choices predefined, and then I can apply them to each of these objects in the system. There's also an Excel file I can load all this information into the system with. So I'm not sure if I saved that properly or not, but you don't have to go through each one of these. You can kind of do this on an Excel file ahead of time if you already have existing BOMs and just put it into Windchill. Okay, but once I have this this BOM set up, this overloaded BOM set up with all these options, I can then go in and apply rules. So I'll go into my edit filter option, and in the edit filter option, this is where I can apply some of these different rules to this BOM. So like in my case, I have these different options. So I can say, for example, for the chassis, we're going to do a mini tower. For the language, we're just going to do a couple of languages. For the operating system, we'll do Windows Vista Business. And the region, we'll just do North America and North and South Asia. And so when I select these options and click OK, my BOM will be filtered based on the options that I've selected. And so some of the options in here, maybe for the software options, will be filtered out and not shown in this BOM. So for example, here, there's only one operating system that's under the OS. That's a software part number. And this one's only been defined for Windows Vista Business System. So now that I have my BOM in the preview state, this is what I configured, and this is what I'm looking at right now to create a variant off of. I can create a module variant directly from this. So go back here. this user can create those. Let me go back and look at the variants that have been created from this. So there's one assigned option set to this that was created for this part, and if I take a look at this set, this one will show me the attributes that were selected. So if I take a look at those previous attributes, so those choices that I selected, I could have created those and saved it from an option set that was predefined, so I can take a look at what that was used, and then I can take a look at all the different options, the rules that were used. In my case, I didn't include any rules. I just selected options, but there could be, exclude, include rules for some of these options. And I can always go back and redefine these options and add additional choices if I need to from this screen. So that is that, that option set that was created. The part, I'll go to the BOM that was created off of that variant using some previous option filters. So this was a variant spec that was created for this BOM. So these were the choices that, so when I created that BOM, if I wanted to track what options I've selected, I could have saved a variant spec. Right? So these were the selected choices that I selected, and then I created a deliverable off of those choices, which was the downstream variant BOM. So now this is a new part number that's coming from that master BOM. If I click on that part number, this is going to be the configured BOM with those choices. And this one here, if I go into the structure page, this one here just looks like any BOM in Windchill. It does not have any of those additional modules. It's not overloaded anymore. It just has the components that were selected for that that BOM itself. So this one here is now the BOM that I can push into my ERP system as a variant off of the original one. But if I go back into the Variants tab and take a look at what was the original BOM that this one came from, I can take a look at that information. So this one here shows me in the variants functionality that this one came from a module variant using this configuration, and this variant spec, if I look at some additional information, was used on this deliverable, which was the downstream. So I can kind of turn on this information that I need to see the information of what this variant was created from. And if I go back into the overloaded BOM and take a look at what variants did I create off of it, I'll go into my tab here. I should be able to show this. So if I just turn on some of this, it's not turned on by default, so I need to go in and turn this on. Create a custom tab here for myself if I'm using variants. So here I can see various information. So I see my assigned choices that I've selected. This is what I was looking at before. The option set attached to this overloaded BOM. There's only one module variant here that was created off of this overloaded BOM, and it's shown here. So if there were more configurations off of this, for example, I can say, you know, let's add another variant off of that BOM. If I created that, you know, I can associate to this one if I wish, or I can go back to the platform part and create another variant off of it. So that is the just quick overview of what I can manage in Windchill in terms of variants. Next section I want to take a look at is, you know, how can we manage variability and color. So one of the things in Windchill that we can do is manage variability, including colors, using those options and variants. But in some cases, I may not need to do that. So TriStar has an app that allows me to create family parts off of Windchill BOMs, off of Windchill parts. So there will be a generic family owner which may have different variations off of it tied to only one CAD model. So as an example, I might have a CAD model driving an initial BOM, and there could be two other BOMs that have different color parts or different materials, and the Windchill family owner could be managing that generic part number, but then all the instances off of it could be then managed using families. So these families are always going to be linked back to the family owner. If I add another option to the family owner, it's not like a family table. I don't need to up-rev everything. That new option just becomes available in Windchill. So I don't have to do anything with CAD, because usually one CAD model will be linked to this. Unless you want a different family table instance or CAD model linked to each of these variant colors or materials, you could have that. But you know, on the CAD side, those may be just controlled by properties. So the other option in Windchill I can enable for BOMs is supplier, managing supplier and replacement parts. So Windchill allows me to manage vendor and manufacturer parts. So for example, a buy part, for example, could be sourced from different manufacturers, and vendors could be supplying those part numbers as well. But that would be linked to an internal part number. Same thing for only using vendors. So if I don't really care about the manufacturer, I just want to source it from a vendor, what part number do I need that represents my internal part? So as an example, I could have multiple manufacturer parts linked to internal part. Those manufacturer parts could also be linked to multiple vendors if multiple vendors supply that one part number. You can skip manufacturer parts, go directly to vendors if you wish. But that allows you to keep that information in Windchill and all consolidated for planning purposes to the original BOM. You can also designate whether some of those are approved, preferred, or do not use options. So if you're retiring parts or switching parts, I can select that information. Windchill also has the ability to manage replacement parts. So if you just want to designate that, you know, there's an alternate part for an existing part number that could be used, this alternate part is suitable for this part number in any assembly that it's used, right? So if I don't have this part in stock, use a different bracket, right? If you have it in stock, no matter what assembly you're using this on. A substitute part, on the other hand, allows me to, you know, designate an alternate or replacement part, but only in that one assembly, right? So it's a substitute for that part, but only in that original assembly where that part is used. In another assembly, that part will not be substituted for. It would still be the original part. And then there's another option, supersede, that I can select also, and especially when I'm taking parts out of service. Okay, so let's take a look at some of those options in Windchill. So if I take a look at my assembly, inside of the structure, I can designate alternate and substitute parts, as well as add supplier parts and create new ones if I wish to. Okay, so I'm just going to go into the structure page and take a look at my BOM for this workstation. So I'll just select on several components, and I'll just show related parts or related information. So one of the options is, for example, replacement and supplier parts. So I'll just show all for these ones. Okay, I'll change my view to a sourcing view first. Okay, so here in my BOM I have several parts. I also have optional cost information coming in from product analytics modules in Windchill. But if I scroll down to another assembly, I think I'll close this one down. Here I can see that there is a fan that I'm using. It has a CAD assembly link to it, but there's also a supplier part. So I'm not designing this fan, I'm purchasing this fan. So there's an approved supplier part that exists for this buy part, which is the main fan. Same thing for the power supply. So the power supply has a few documents. There's a CAD assembly that I need, but I'm purchasing these two parts. So there's an approved and the preferred vendor number for this power supply. So that information is seen right in the structure, and I can create and remove that information if I wish, if I have the permission to do this. So for example, if this one is no longer the preferred, I can, for example, select, let's not use this one anymore. Right, so that will communicate back to the designer that that part should not be used, or communicate this to purchasing. So if I'm pushing this BOM into ERP systems, this part will no longer be available as a supplier part number. Excuse me. I can always also take a look at replacement parts as well. So if I change my view, I'll show the same BOM, but in this case I'll just show this structure and show any replacement parts associated to any of these part numbers. So here I have an icon that shows me that there's a replacement for this fan. So if I take a look at what are those replacement part numbers, in this case this is a substitute only in this assembly. So there's a dash 001 fan, but I also substituted this with a dash 002 fan. So if this one's not available, I can safely use this one, but only in this assembly. So how do I add, how do I remove substitute parts, replacement parts? Here I have a manage replacements option for a part, and I can use this wizard to add alternate and substitute parts. So if I want to add another substitute part, if that part number is already created in Windchill, I can search for it. If it's not created, I can create that part as a part number. I can create a CAD model after the fact. And in my case, that's not the number, that's the name. I'll search for any parts matching the keyword fan. So those are the two parts that came up, and I can just select that 002 part like I did here. That will automatically get added to the structure, as a substitute part. That functionality is available in core Windchill, so I can use that to designate those type of parts if I'm interested in doing that. And then of course any other reports, the BOM reports in Windchill, I can, for example, report out on let's say the top level, or maybe the sub-assembly. In this case I'll just use a sub-assembly because it'll be smaller. I'll just do a report showing me all the replacement parts. So here I could see that sub-assembly, the main fan. The fan itself has a substitute part. I can also do the same thing for any parts with supplier parts. So when I do a BOM on that sub-assembly, I can see that there is for this internal part number, there's a manufacturer part number, and this is the manufacturer that I'm using. And if I had multiple, that would be shown here. So these reports can be configured, and I can get a quick understanding of what is making up my bill of material in Windchill. Okay, so those were replacement parts. I also want to just quickly run through the parts classification option. So parts classification is just another search that I can go into and find parts. I can classify my parts with information, such as performance information or categories. I can also classify supplier parts if I wish to. So let's take a look at that example. So the classification itself is in the search in Windchill. So here I have an option called Classification Explorer. And again, this is core functionality of a module called PartsLink. So here as a user, if I'm looking for parts, I have a hierarchy, a classification structure here. I also have a graphical navigation pane here. So let's say I'm looking for mechanical parts. There's 356 of them. So as soon as someone adds a new part, that's automatically going to display how many of those I have. So there's 2 bearings. There's a plane and a roller bearing. So let's take a look at the plane bearing. So there's only one linear bushing. So if I click on that item, excuse me, this is going to give me that part number. So if I take a look at that part number, this is the bearing that I selected. That's going to show me information on that part. And in the attribute section, I'll have the ability to put in additional attributes, and those attributes are going to apply only for that category. So here I have mainly mechanical attributes. I don't have electrical attributes. And these are classification attributes only. So they don't mix with your other attributes like descriptions and so on if you have those on your parts. So those are all the attributes for the classification node. This is just for this instance, for this part. So that's the thickness, that's the weight, and so on. So when I have this classification set up, I can then do my keyword searches. So I can say, looking for bushings, either by part number or the name itself. And I'll just do bearing instead because there's probably one bushing. So I'll just search for bearing parts. There should be a few of these. So I have 2 bearing parts that came up in my search result. And if I just go back to the default view, this one will show me information on my search from those 2 parts. If I go back into my search criteria, I can search for that part using those classification attributes as well. So if I want to search for a certain classification of parts, I can say, well, let's go to mechanical parts, and there's only 2 bearings. Let me pick something with more parts. So if I do, let's search for let's say screws. Right, so I can select that classification category. There's more categories underneath it. Let's say I'm only looking for screws in that classification category. And I'm going to remove the word bearing because I have the word bearing in there. I don't want to search for bearings because that's not a screw. Just remove that. And that's going to give me a whole bunch of screws. And then I have the categories on the left-hand side that I can search for. So for example, length of screw. I can say, well, let's search between this size and this size. Right, so I can then use these sliders in my search results. Because I've entered this information, I've classified each of these screws. So now I have only 31 screws come up with this size. Right, and I can kind of go through here and choose additional options. So that is the functionality of this classification in Windchill. When I create a new part, I can automatically classify it, and then that's going to be available for me to search for. And if that part already exists, I'll be able to see and kind of minimize duplicate parts in my assemblies. Okay, so that was a quick example of the classification. Let's take a look at how we can now transform BOMs in Windchill. So typically different BOMs are going to be required for different stages within a company. Planning purposes, ordering, manufacturing. Windchill has the ability to define different BOM views. And Windchill has the downstream and upstream concept. So usually the BOM starts from engineering or design and then gets configured for downstream purposes. But if there's any downstream changes, they could be also pushed up to upstream BOMs. So I can alert the designer that there's a part that's failing in manufacturing, that they may need to use a different part or modify that part. So Windchill, went a bit too far. So Windchill has a module that allows me to do BOM transformation all in one easy to use wizard. So I can overlay my design BOM on the left-hand side. I can split screen and overlay my downstream BOM that I'm creating on the right-hand side. And as I'm building that manufacturing BOM, that downstream BOM, for example, I get a graphical preview of the parts that I'm consuming. So as soon as I move the parts to the manufacturing side, they'll gray out on the design side. Right? So I can start building my BOM. I can reorder my assemblies, create kits as I need to. This also supports options and variants. So if I have an overloaded BOM and I want to configure that variant to have multiple manufacturing operations or manufacturing parts, I can define a variant BOM that has maybe multiple kits that I might be using depending on the variant specification. So those two modules work together. So here's an example. I'll just kind of play this back for a minute or so. What a user would do to create a manufacturing structure in Windchill. So I'm going to launch my BOM Transformation wizard. It's going to show me my BOM on the left, my BOM on the right. If I turn on my visualization tab, and those BOMs have CAD models associated to it, it's going to use just Creo View to take a look at what that BOM looks like. And there's going to be these green check marks in the columns beside these parts showing whether they are the most current up-to-date parts used on the manufacturing side or not. So if there is a part that's out of sync between the two BOMs, now by default the two BOMs don't update automatically. You wouldn't want them to because the manufacturing strategy might be different than the most latest changes to the design BOM. I can also filter and create different manufacturing BOMs for different plants. So I might have certain parts used in plant 2 versus plant 1. They're all coming from the original design BOM, but they have different manufacturing uses in the different plants. So here there's one part that's out of sync. Engineering has created a brand new rev of a model, and that rev needs to be pushed back into the MBOM. So there's going to be a warning flag that the two BOMs are not synchronized. So the user can go in and take that part and update the MBOM with the new rev of that part. So the user will, kind of select that part on the left-hand side. Now this is the manufacturing user that's updating his manufacturing BOM, and update that. And vice versa. I can be a designer that manufacturing has made a suggestion, and I might want to update my design BOM with their changes. So I can easily preview that in the viewer. What is that part visually? What has that changed? Traditionally, a lot of times the BOM and BOM transformation happens in Excel files, so it's very difficult to see what that part is. You got to go to drawings. You have to find that information, look at a change notice or a change request. In Windchill, I can quickly see here, what is that part? What is that discrepancy? What has changed? What was the change? Was it a quantity change? Was it a version change? And I can then update the BOMs that I need with the options within this wizard. Okay, so that's just a quick example. If you're interested in that type of functionality, let us know. One of the other things I'll just end off with here before we run out of time is, how can we then push this information into downstream systems? So Windchill has various ways, through workflows or just through actions, to push these various BOMs into ERP systems. So whether it's a MBOM that's been created using PDMLink, or whether that's a variant BOM with replacement parts, substitute parts, vendor make versus buy parts, I can designate all that information, and the ERP connectors will understand those different part numbers, those different BOM types, and allow me to push only those into ERP that are selected. Okay, so I hope you found this overview helpful, just to give you an idea what is available in Windchill and the different uses of these. So thank you for attending this webinar. If you have any questions, I'll take the next couple of minutes to take a look at any questions. If not, I'll end the webinar, and I want to wish everyone a great day. I don't see any questions, so thanks for your time, everyone. We ran over a little bit. Hopefully you found this helpful. Have a great day.